Today is Election Day in Los Angeles and across the state of California. What was supposed to be a contentious governor's race has pretty much flamed out after a failed attempt to recall Gavin Newsom. However, there are two very contentious races happening in the city of Los Angeles. That's the mayor's race as well as the sheriff for LA County. Today, as voters go to the poll, we're going to take a closer look at these high-profile races that are dominating California primary elections. I'm going to be talking with a veteran politician who was once a candidate for Los Angeles mayor, my good friend Wendy Gruhl. All coming up next.
Live from Los Angeles, this is the Special Report with Areva Martin.
Today, I'm going one-on-one with Wendy Gruhl. She was once Los Angeles' city controller. She was a councilwoman for the city of Los Angeles, and she was a prominent candidate for mayor of Los Angeles. So she knows a lot about what it takes to run for a city that is comprised of over 3 million people. Good morning and welcome, Wendy.
Good morning. So happy to join you today, Areva.
Yes, it's Election Day. I can't believe it. But yes, this is the primary that we decided some years ago, I guess a couple of years ago, that we would put on for the city elections as well as the state elections to time them, to mirror them with the federal elections. So I don't know. I've seen the ballot. I've gotten my ballot. I'm sure you've gotten yours. And it's a lot of stuff on this ballot since they've combined all of these races. Do you think the voters are going to be overwhelmed by the number of people they have to vote for today?
I think it will be a change. I mean, there's a lot of items from a couple of measures that the voters are looking at, a bond measure, that looking at ways in which it's from the state to the local, county-wide, and so people have to kind of go through page by page.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of people asking me for like my sample ballot, and I hadn't done it myself until about, a couple of days ago. And when I sat down with it, I was like, oh my God, whenever there are judges and city races and propositions, and then you have the state assembly, your state senator, the governor's on the ballot, your U.S. congressperson, your U.S. senator. I mean, so this is pretty enormous. And most people, maybe they know 2 or 3 of the people that are running, but, most people never know the judges and some of those other really critical and important races. Are you at all shocked, Wendy, by the reports coming out about how low the voter turnout, and when I say turnout, I mean the return of ballots, because we all got our ballots in the mail. We could start returning them as early as May, but the numbers look pretty poor at this point.
Very dim. I mean, if you look at even the last election during COVID, where we had a lot more people who had turned in their ballots by this time, I think there is a little bit of voter fatigue. And what is ironic is that they moved the election to this period of time thinking there would be greater participation. And I think it is diluted a bit because of so much on the ballot. And I think we'll see today where it kind of looks a little bit like the traditional. I remember when I was running, more people went on the day of and turned it in that day versus those that did it in the early voting. So I think people have to be creative in ways in which they get people to focus and to vote and to turn in their ballot.
Yeah, you make a really good point. I mean, we've moved to a state, and we've been on this trajectory for a long time, where mail-in ballots have become more predominant than, going to the polls, which used to be a ritual for lots of groups, particularly African Americans and other groups that, had a whole ritual around getting out to the poll. But now the focus is on getting those ballots in the mail. I hope that today that people actually don't just, blow it off and they actually make their way to the polls. But I am worried about the the low voter turnout, particularly amongst those core Democratic groups. I mean, African-American return of ballots so far has been really, really low. I mean, several newspapers have written about it. Commentators have been talking about it. So I'm hoping that Black voters show up today, because we know Sunday there are lots of politicians showing up in Black churches, which I want to talk to you, Wendy. You've run successfully in the city of Los Angeles, and you had your attempt to become the first female mayor of the city of Los Angeles, and Eric Garcetti, as we know, run that race, as disappointing as that was to many of us who worked really hard on your campaign, but we are really proud of the work that you've done in the city. But talk to me, Wendy, about being a female candidate, because over the weekend I actually interviewed Malia Cohen, who is running statewide for state controller, and Malia really shocked me with some of the things that she says are happening to her today. And I just want to know, are these shocking to you? Things like people commenting on her wardrobe, on the color of lipstick that she chooses, and on the fact that she's a mother. People literally asking her, shouldn't you be at home with your new baby?
Yeah.
Are those comments shocking to you in 2022?
Unfortunately not. And 9 years ago is when I was in the primary, and I was taught by my mom and many of my mentors, you can do anything, and particularly if you're a woman. I think that we are still seeing those discriminatory kind of views of individuals and women who are running for office. I know that even when Karen Bass was on the cover of the LA magazine, and the actual title said, about that she was a VP candidate, but could she be tough enough? And I was, of course, my head was spinning and smoke coming out of my ears, because they would never write that about a man. And I know for me, it was many comments on my wardrobe, on my hair, did I grow my hair longer, whatever it would be. It is interesting. I always used to joke that, we needed another hour of the day because we were so expected to compete with the men going on TV cameras. But it took us a lot longer because we had to do all those things. We were expected to do those things, that you had to wear something colorful. If you wore it too colorful, it was wrong. If you wore a dark suit, that was a problem. And so I think we still see that, and the kinds of descriptors that people have of women in the articles, on interviews, et cetera, is still disturbing to me. And we just have to battle that.
Yeah, I would have thought, maybe hoped, because I'm clearly not naive, but hope that having Kamala Harris as VP, having Nancy Pelosi back as the Speaker of the House, and some of the high-profile women that are in national offices, that maybe, just maybe, we were moving past some of those tropes that I know and I remember vividly when I worked closely with you in your campaign. But it doesn't seem like it, and you're right. Questioning, that has been something that has plagued Karen Bass in her run-up for election for Los Angeles mayor. She's hoping to become the first female mayor, the first female African-American mayor of the city of Los Angeles. And yet still questions about, is she, quote unquote, tough enough? So I talked to Professor Ange Marie Hancock. She's a professor of political science, professor over at USC, about why are we still doubting women's leadership abilities? And she says that as much progress as we've made, that those tropes about women not being natural born leaders still are pretty pervasive. I mean, is that your sense too?
I think so too. And, our Vice President, Kamala Harris, much more scrutiny on her than other vice presidential candidates as a woman. And, I know she has many stories, as you and I have spoken to her over the years, of how she was treated. And she was a prosecutor. She was in one of those toughest positions. And I think, as you mentioned, and Malia Cohen, being a mom, I remember when I was pregnant with my son as an elected official and running for re-election. And I had people either, one, asked me if I was going to quit my job after I had just gotten elected because I was pregnant, or two, that I should go home and be a real mom to my child. When in fact we know that, and you as a dynamic a woman and all the things that you do, our kids are stronger for that. I think the way in which we manage as we are parents, as we are leaders, elected leaders, it is important that we use all of those experiences to be able to lead. it is always still, shocking to me as well that people will vote many times for women in a legislative body, but they have a very hard time in executive positions. However, we have seen the numbers. I am hopeful as a national board member of Emily's List as we watch the many women candidates across the country that we have so many more governors and senators and mayors of big cities. We haven't of Los Angeles. We're hoping, that is one thing that we will cross the threshold. But I think we are seeing some of those examples of where women can be incredibly tough, but they are criticized, so much more vehemently than the men are in some of those positions.
I'm glad you made that distinction, Wendy, because I don't think people think of that yes, some voters, and let's call out women too, because these aren't just men voters, women voters as well, are more comfortable having women leaders in legislative bodies than they are having women in those executive roles, governors and mayors, and obviously the ultimate executive role of that of you, President of the United States. That's interesting. So what do you think that is? Let's break that down a little. Is it that, women can make good laws, but they, can't lead teams? Or, what do you think is behind that?
Well, it's interesting. In many of my races where I talked about I could bring consensus, I would be the individual who could bring people together, sit at the table, make decisions with them. And that was kind of a dirty word. Being a consensus builder was not good. You have to be able to punch. Well, some of the toughest people I know are women who can make decisive, take decisive actions. So I think it is just, preconceived ideas of how women operate in the boardroom as well as an elected office holder. But I do have hope that we are seeing some very strong women who can also, aren't the ones who pound the table every single day, because I know that means you stop listening to them for the men who are pounding so hard because you're like, oh, they're doing it again, versus a woman who will be like, this is what I'm going to do. And when they do pound the table, people listen and they're going to take action in that way. There is I think an understanding from women who have either they've been a single mom, if they have struggled to get where they are, and understand the issues of childcare, understand the issues of discrimination, of equality. It is important that they are in those positions of power to be able to use those experiences as they design public policy, as they legislate, as they make decisions as an executive.
Yeah, let's talk more about this race between Karen Bass and Rick Caruso. So we know Karen Bass, Congresswoman for state of California, has been in that office for over a decade, has been working in Los Angeles as a nurse practitioner at USC, and then building a nonprofit organization, Community Coalition. And Rick Caruso, billionaire developer who has never been in politics, never held an elected office, who started in the polls when he first announced, he had, under 5%, basically was not registering on the polls. And now the latest LA Times poll that just came out on Sunday has Rick at about 32%, Karen at about 38%. And that's after Rick has poured literally close to $40 million into this race. If you live in Los Angeles, you can't turn on your television, you can't turn on the radio, you can't go to your social media page without seeing one of his slick ads. And he's just bombarded the airwaves, and he's gone from, less than 5% to being in a statistical dead heat with Karen Bass, who's always been a front runner. What do you think about that? And is that something that you've seen played out in any of the races you run, where someone's come in with that kind of money and just have literally bought name recognition in a very short period of time?
We have not seen that in Los Angeles. We've seen that obviously in other cities and states across the country. And I can't imagine being a candidate because at a time like this. When I ran, I think my primary was about $5.5 million that you had to raise in $1,300 increments. That's a lot of people to talk to, a lot of people to be able to support you. And Karen has similarly raised that kind of money. And you feel like that's an accomplishment. You're going to be competitive competitive. And then someone comes in with that much money, and it is challenging. And you hope that people will see as they are making their decision that it won't be based on money. And we have seen it in both ways, where a lot of money has been spent in governor in the state of California, and they lost, or in senator, when people spent, twice as much money as maybe the incumbent or the other candidate. So I think money isn't everything, but it is frustrating. I am certain for the Bass campaign to be able to compete with that. Although I was talking to my son last night about the race, and he said some of his friends aren't necessarily going to vote for Rick Caruso because he's in everything that they're doing. So they're like, just stop. I don't want another ad. I just don't, So it may backfire when there's that much. But
yeah, there is a point of saturation beyond which is like, okay, I can't watch this, whether it's a political ad or an ad for, Coca-Cola, whatever it is. Sometimes there is something called too much, like, that's it.
Turn off. So, what I hope that people will do, no matter where you are on this race, which is to look at where they stand on the issues, look at the experiences that they have, really read some of the articles and others that have come out. So you are an educated voter. And I believe that we have a lot of people who are doing that, who are looking at it. And I think after today, there's going to be a lot more scrutiny and I think demonstrating the differences between the two candidates. For those that, this being that first election where we on with the statewide and federal, in the past mayor's race 9 years ago, primary was in March, and then first week of May was the election. This is a much longer period of time. We are not going to be till November. So there will be a lot more commercials, a lot more interaction and debates. But I do think there's going to be an opportunity then to see the differences between the two candidates.
Yeah, I'm glad you reminded us of that, Wendy, that this is going to be a very long period between the primary today, June 7th, and November, when the whole country is going to go to the polls. That means that Rick Caruso will probably spend close to $100 million, if not more, because if we're already looking at $40 million, and he's only been in the race several months, and now he's going to have like 5 months. So this could be one of the most expensive mayoral races, I don't know, in the history of this country, but definitely in the history of Los Angeles. And we should talk about ads not just coming from Caruso and his own campaign. In California, we have these unique things called independent expenditures, where groups unaffiliated with the candidate can spend untold amounts of money, or, no limits, not the $1,500 clip or the $1,300 clips that you had to deal with, but literally people can dump hundreds of thousands of dollars into a fund that can then run ads for a candidate. And we see that happening with the Los Angeles Police Protective League running these negative ads against Karen Bass. How influential can third-party ads be in a race like this?
In many instances, they can be helpful. The positive ads, they're out there, again, unlimited contributions that they can make versus the fact when a candidate can only raise so much from one individual. And so the competitive nature is different. But it also can be a negative. I will say when I ran 9 years ago, I was supported by the labor union of the DWP employees, and they contributed to an independent expenditure for me, as well as the Police Protective League and the firefighters and many others. But that became a negative. That became a point in which they went after me. So I always jokingly say when people ask, how did you lose? I said, there were things I would do differently. And then there are things that are not within your control. And oftentimes those IEs are part of that, that people can grab onto that and say, what is that group that has influence over you? Or if you are putting your own money, how does that impact your contributions and the kinds of elected official you will be?
Yeah, so we know, Wendy, that Rick Caruso has a really kind of checkered past with the Democratic Party. He has obviously given money in the past to Democratic candidates, but to run for mayor, he changed his party affiliation just a month before he jumped into the race. And he's now registered as a Democrat, but many people have a lot of concerns that basically he's a closeted Republican. When you look at what he's done throughout his life, the support he's given to Republican candidates, boards that he's served on, the Ronald Reagan Library Board that he's been a member of, Donald Trump's Economic Policy Board, where he convened all of these corporate executives. So what do you make of this, that a candidate, changes party affiliation, and then you see Democrats, because LA and the state of California, but LA in particular, predominantly Democratic city, but yet you have Democrats, lifelong Democrats, supporting the candidate that became a Democrat like 12 seconds ago.
And I think in Los Angeles, it is a nonpartisan. We don't have next to our names as a local elected official or a local candidate, a D or an R next to your name, or an I, depending upon your party affiliation if you're independent. And so I think, and particularly as you look at the other candidates that are in this race, there are a lot of other Democrats necessarily. So you see a distribution of people's votes in the primary. I don't think you'll see the same in the general. Again, when it is attached to a national election and statewide, where there is a very big focus on Democrats and Republicans, the difference between the two, I think it becomes even more important. However, I believe that people in Los Angeles are just like, I want someone who's going to be able to run the city. And so sometimes they aren't listening to as much a Democrat or Republican, but on the very major issues that are focusing us today that are national and that political parties get involved in. So whether that is abortion and rights and Roe v. Wade being overturned, to gun safety, to civil rights, those often separate the difference between Republicans and Democrats. And people will go to the polls and be thinking that as they're selecting who their next mayor will be. And history does matter. And I think that's why, if you're a candidate, you'd love to win in the primary. And there was a lot of conversation a few weeks ago, I think probably created by the campaign, Rick's campaign, which is, I'm going to win by 50+1. And partly that is because, you want to be able to not have to go through that bruising, how many months of looking into every vote, every contribution you have made. But I think people are going to look for someone who shares their values, and oftentimes that is their political point of view. But I think you can't underestimate that people just want to see a city that works, and they're going to look to somebody who can do that, who can bring people together to be able to address those issues, homelessness and crime, et cetera.
I hear you, Wendy, but and you're right, and I'm not questioning your judgment on this. You've done this a lot longer than I've done it. I do it as an outside observer and as an advisor to candidates.
Very active, yeah.
I challenge you on some of these sophisticated folks that we've seen jump on the Rick Caruso bandwagon. One in particular, Maria Shriver. So Maria Shriver has to be the most astute person, in politics. Her family, she's a Kennedy. She's Maria Kennedy Shriver. So when you see someone like her who understands the implications of voting for a person like Rick Caruso, who becomes a Democrat primarily to gain the votes and to make it okay for people like her to vote for him, because if that wasn't important, he could have just entered the race as an independent or as a Republican. But he knows that being a Democrat mattered in this race. And Maria knows that the mayor of the city of Los Angeles is not just the mayor of the city of Los Angeles. That person is going to have an oversized role in national Democratic politics. And we have a big election coming up in 2024. You and I have been at those conventions, and we know whoever the mayor of the city of Los Angeles is, that Democratic mayor is likely to be on that stage at that convention in 2024, is likely maybe even to be in the past. Eric Garcetti was the co-chair of Joe Biden's presidential campaign. So when you select Rick Caruso as the candidate for mayor of Los Angeles, you're making a bigger decision Now, I don't expect, your everyday voter that's not inside politics to necessarily be thinking about that. But we know someone like Maria Shriver understands that. I mean, she knows Dem politics inside and out. She was there when the book was being written, maybe wrote the book herself. So what do you make of that endorsement of Caruso?
And I think you're right. I mean, the bully pulpit that you have as the mayor of Los Angeles, and why there's so much focus, and why even 9 years ago there was a lot of national organizations and women organizations supporting me, because that was an important message to send, because of the unique nature of that and the ability to be able to use that bully pulpit. And so I think that what we found, it has been interesting, but it goes back to that in local politics, people are less likely as to whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. And if they are a friend of that person, they'll say, well, now I can vote for them because they're a Democrat. It'd be interesting to see if he had not changed his registration, whether or not some of those prominent Democratic leaders and would have done that if he had not changed his registration. I do think it was strategic in his thought processes as he was getting ready to run for mayor, and believed that he could get people who might have been hesitant to now say, okay, I can do that because he is now a registered Democrat, even though in the past he was a Republican for a long period of time.
Okay, but how does the party give the national party? Because a lot of these prominent Democrats also play a prominent role in national politics, and they want to, because these conventions, as you and I know, are like, big Hollywood events, and everybody wants to be, in the VIP section. They want to be in the special reception. So these are some of the same people that would be in those inner circles in national politics. They want to get invited to the White House. They want to, they want to be very prominent in the national party. So when they make these local decisions, again, they have far-reaching implications, as we are seeing with some of these white women celebrities, Gwyneth Paltrow, Katy Perry, Kim Kardashian, also coming out for Rick Caruso, all women who stood in solidarity with Black Lives Matter, all women who stood up and said they were with Black Lives Matter and activists on issues of police reform after George Floyd was murdered. Rick Caruso's approach to crime is what some consider, and I'm one of them, is the further militarization of LAPD. Put 1,500 additional cops on the street, and we know that when you add 15, first of all, you're not going to be able to find them. And if you can, they're mostly going to come from communities outside of Los Angeles, and they're going to end up in communities occupied by Black and brown people. Let's face it, that's where those 1,500 police are going to mostly go. So we know that sets back efforts to reform LAPD, takes us back to that period of the 90s, that tough, tough on crime, law and order kind of policing that leads to the murder of George Floyd and, other high profile murders that we've seen. So I've been asking on social media, how do you stand with Black Lives Matter and activists on issues of police reform? And Karen Bass, who's been the leader of police reform legislation at the national level, you then stand with the guy that wants to put 1,500 cops basically in South LA, because that's what it's going to end up being. And you and I know that, and they know that, because these are sophisticated people. So what's going on with these allies?
It's an interesting question that I don't have the right answer for necessarily, but I think it is more, this is, if they know, this is my friend. This is my friend who I've known for a really long time, and I know they're not going to go in that direction. And so people's decision making as they are supporting people, and as I think sometimes for me as a candidate, even disappointing when you think, wait a minute, this is me. I'm gonna be the person that's done all these things. Like, well, I kind of know the other person. And so I think, again, there's a very big difference, which I found is running for both from federal and local, how people perceive someone running for local office. And also, how people, I think, have stereotypes of individuals. And we know, for example, Karen Bass has said very strongly she doesn't believe in, defund the police. She wants to reform police, department, but they still kind of try to put that moniker on her in a way that says you're going to be less safe, which is just not true in my conversations with her as well. And so I think it is about, well, they're my friend. That's how I know them. And you can do that on local because it's no DRR next to your name. But as you have rightly said, this is one of the most powerful positions in the entire country. Being the mayor of the second largest city in the country is a very important position in which to be in. And so I kind of scratch my head and you just wonder when people go in to vote, what is in their thought processes that are pushing the button or they're coloring in the circle as to, are they thinking about national politics? Or are they thinking about their own neighborhood and how that's going to work? But I will go back and say, though, there are some really important national issues where I know it's going to be important to me to say, where do you stand on the positions that are affecting this country right now? My right to my body and making health decisions, understanding that we need gun control, understanding that we need civil rights and being able to have people have the right to vote, and that you want someone who's going to be mayor of Los Angeles who's going to stand up and yell loudly and strongly for the positions that you care about, even though it might be a national issue.
What about race, Wendy? Obviously, you didn't have to deal with race, but we know Karen faces implicit bias for two reasons. One, because she is a woman, female candidate, and second, because she's African American. And there have been allegations that Rick's campaign has darkened her face in some of the ads, and that Rick is purposely playing on fears that a lot of white wealthy people have in Los Angeles, because there have been some high-profile murders in some exclusive and affluent neighborhoods, and that we know when you talk about crime and you talk about, white neighborhoods, it's easy to get white people thinking that the other people, i.e. the black people and the brown people, are coming into their neighborhoods and making their neighborhoods unsafe, and that if you don't do something and have this tough on crime approach, that these other people are going to invade their neighborhoods. And that we've seen that kind of play work in elections, that white people are fearful. We know there's still those tropes about black people and black, Latino people being violent. How much of that do you think is influencing, what some people may call, I'm just voting for my friend?
Well, I think, unfortunately, I think that racism exists, that discrimination still exists. We always talk about the Bradley effect. I worked for Tom Bradley in my early career when he was running for governor, and that people would say on the phone when you would ask who they're going to vote for, and they would answer, Mayor Bradley, even though they were going to go in and say, I'm not going to vote for the individual, the African American on the ballot. And so I think it is unfortunate. We have made a lot of progress, but not enough on women, not enough on race. And I think it is going to be important for the Bass campaign, which I know they are doing, which is get their own voters out. That's what people are focusing on today, which they were over the weekend. It is not convincing voters at this point in time. It is getting your voters out and making sure that their ballots have been returned to ensure that you have that balance. But it is an unfortunate fact of life, as we saw nationally with both Kamala and with Obama and with Hillary Clinton. Those tropes, those discriminatory kinds of thoughts people have are still there, but we have to continue to try to tear them down.
And just lastly, I got to ask you about homelessness. Obviously, in addition to crime, probably the most important issue that's driving Los Angeles voters, because when you drive through Los Angeles, there are homeless encampments and tents and people living on the streets. And that has been one of the biggest issues in the city and the county for several years now, literally decades, but it's been more prominent lately. And you have been a part of the solution. You've been working on homelessness for the last couple of years. And we know it, again, in terms of the candidates, Rick Caruso says, kind of like Donald Trump, let him have all the power because he can fix it. He's a developer. He's going to build all this housing. But we know as a developer, he's not built one single unit of affordable housing as he's built these, massive, very expensive mall projects. But somehow the message that he has on homelessness, even though some of the things he said included putting homeless people in those kind of cages that we saw used at the border in Texas for immigrants. But people are buying into his, I can fix this problem. Why do you think that is, given, more than anyone, the complexity of the homeless issue? And this is not just about building a house. You can build 1,000,000 houses in LA, and that's not going to solve the homeless crisis that we have, because the problem is so much bigger. But yet people are buying into this notion that as a billionaire developer, I can get housing built quickly and I can get people off the streets.
It is probably one of the toughest and most complex issues there is, because it is about mental health. It is about drug addiction. It is about poverty, domestic violence. But most importantly, it is about housing. And you're going to need someone who is mayor of Los Angeles, who's going to be able to bring all the people together and the resources, because it is not something that you can dictate. I'm going to just clean that street. There are laws that say you're allowed to sleep on that sidewalk. There are laws that say you cannot put someone who is mentally ill in a facility unless they are a danger to themselves. And so this is going to be one of those issues where you must balance the needs of the community and the needs of the individual, a homeless person. And so it is not simple. All these TV ads or all of the mailers that I get, that it's just I'm going to come in and be able to do it, is not necessarily the case. It will take leadership. It will take, some of the things Karen Bass has talked about as well, which is bringing people to the table, say, where are you going to step up to deal with that mental health crisis? And so as this campaign goes forward, they'll be looking to both candidates and say, okay, what are you really going to do immediately? And not just be talking about what's in a TV ad. That's going to be the kind of conversations that are going to happen next several months. And it is an issue that took a long time for us to create, and it's going to take us time to be able to solve, but it will take leaders who say, I'm going to bring everyone together to solve it.
Last question, Wendy. Barring something totally unusual, we now know from this LA Times poll, there's not a snowball chance in hell that Rick Caruso is going to get 50 plus 1% today. Stranger things have happened, but that's not what the polling suggests. The polling suggests there's going to be a runoff, and Karen Bass and Rick Caruso will be in that runoff. What's the single, most important thing that Karen Bass can do between tonight, when those numbers come in, and hopefully she and Rick Caruso are in this runoff, and when we get between now and that November general election?
Well, I think for everyone who is in Los Angeles, it is about getting to meet and see those people in communities across Los Angeles. There's close to 4 million people in the city, and to be able to see and to be able to describe how she's going to be a problem solver, how she's going to be able to do this, her strengths, and that she can be tough enough, but she also has the skills, I will say, as a woman, that you can be that consensus builder. It's not a negative. And that what the public is going to look towards is somebody that they can trust, and that is going to be mayor every single day, addressing the issues that are important to us. And so the benefit, a little bit of that at 5 months, is the ability to interact and see people. And it's not just going to be based on money. It is going to be based on the people. I used to say, if I could just meet every voter, and as much as Eric Garcetti and I are good friends, I'd be able to convince them I'm the best one. That is going to be what you want to be able to do, is to touch those voters, because TV ads and mailers are only going to get you so far. And there's going to be, I think, a group now that is going to come together after this and say, for one or other, when you have 8, however many people there are, it seems like there's a lot on the ballot who are running for mayor. You're now going to see people go, I'm going to choose between 2. And you will see some sides. And it's going to be an interesting several months. And I think it is not what anyone would have necessarily expected. It's going to be lots of ups and downs. But the people of Los Angeles, I know, are going to go into the ballot box and say, who's going to make my life better? Who's going to understand who I am and the struggles that I have?
Well, thank you so much, Wendy. I have fond memories of 9 years ago of working, had the honor and privilege to work closely with you on that campaign. We came very, 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 very close. You were an outstanding candidate. You've served the city so well in so many different ways, as controller, as city council person, as candidate for mayor, now working on homeless issues and serving on boards across the city. And I'm just grateful, because people don't become the first unless people like you have the courage to, step out there and take that first step. And you did that, and you've paved the way for a candidate like Karen Bass to come along, and hopefully she will cross that finish line. And if she does so, it's because you had the courage to get out there and you ran such an incredible campaign that came so close to doing it.
Thank you, Areva, for your not only support then, but your encouragement and women, helping women. And I was asking a candidate the other day, so horrible to run for office and raise money. And she's, the best part, though, is the people that you meet and the friendships that you develop in that. And yours is one of them. And I value that and your advice and counsel. And so thank you for being part of the solution and supporting people like Karen and me and so many others.
Be well, my friend. Thank you again. I want to thank my guest, Wendy Grew. It's always great to sit down with a friend and also someone who's been an incredible public servant. Wendy, as I said, has been in Los Angeles politics for almost 2 decades. And I remember when she was running for mayor of Los Angeles, she said 9 years ago, she used to bring her son Thomas along with her. And for those people that criticize women for running for office as mothers, I'm here to tell you, you need to shut up. Because not only did Thomas have the most amazing time with his mother on the campaign trail, he learned so much. He became an expert high school debater. He became very interested himself in politics. He now is at Washington University in St. Louis, where he is a pre-law student. He wants to go to law school. And guess what? Thomas also wants to go into politics. And where did he get that from? He got it from his mother. Not because he was at home with a babysitter, or not because his mother decided not to run because she had a son, but because he had a front row seat at mayoral debates, at fundraisers, at town hall meetings. He got to meet some of the most influential people in politics across this state and across the country. He got to see the excitement and enthusiasm of people who came out to his mom's rallies and who were supporting his mom. And all of those experiences led Thomas into wanting to pursue a career in the law and in politics. So I say right on to those women who are running for office while doing a fantastic job of raising their children. So I hope we can put that sexist trope to bed once and for all. This notion that somehow men as fathers make great candidates and can run for office, but somehow when a woman who decides to have a family and to run for office, that somehow she's damaged goods or that she's damaging her children. None of that is true. And it's time for us to stop buying into, both men and women, these tropes that somehow men are natural born leaders and women aren't tough enough because maybe they don't scream and shout and use profanities and they don't throw things across the room. There is such a thing as quiet strength. Someone said about Karen Bass, there was an article written over the weekend by a prominent LA Times columnist, and she interviewed Black men in this Black part of LA called Leimert Park, and she was asking them who were they voting for, and surprisingly, many of them said they were voting for Rick Caruso, and they described Karen as, and this is Congresswoman Karen Bass, let me be clear about that, they described her as a sweet woman. How offensive. Here is a woman that has literally done everything that you would expect someone in public office to do, has dedicated her life to public service, has been a state representative, ran for Congress, and I should remind you that when she was in the state assembly, she was the first Black woman ever to be the speaker of a legislative body the size of California's legislative body, our state assembly. She made history in becoming the first Black woman speaker of the California State Assembly. You don't get to do that by being a sweet woman. You get to do that by being a shrewd and strategic politician, and that's what she is. And she has been incredibly effective in the U.S. House of Representatives. She has led on issues of foster care, on criminal justice reform, on civil rights, on reproductive health for women, on so many issues that voters, not only across the country, but voters right here in Los Angeles say they care about. And as you can tell, I'm fired up and passionate about Karen Bass as a candidate. And I want to say I'm passionate about her for a lot of reasons. And one is because she's Black and because she's a Black woman. And we have an opportunity to make history in this city by electing the first woman and the first Black woman in the history of Los Angeles, the 200 years or so. There's not been a female mayor. And that's a problem. And many people get crazy or offended or somehow weird when you talk about making history by electing a Black woman. They say that's identity politics. Areva, why do you always talk about race? Why do you always talk about gender? I do because it's important to talk about it. And nobody accuses white men of, playing identity politics when they support the status quo and elect white man after white man after white man after white man for pretty much every executive office in this country, from governor to president to mayor, but for Tom Bradley, the only Black mayor that this city has had, but for Antonio Villaraigosa, the only Latinx mayor that this city has had. Los Angeles has been governed by white men. And I think it's time to change that. And not to change it for the Black woman just because she's a Black woman, but because she is a qualified Black woman, because she has served in government, because she has a track record of solving problems and of standing up to lobbyists and standing up to special interest groups and to standing up for marginalized people. She is an advocate for so many issues that are near and dear to me, from autism to foster care to criminal justice reform. Those things are important, and having someone that knows the job is important. Hey, we've been there with the tough, rich, white guy that says, I can fix all of the problems. We did that. We did that in 2016. And how did that turn out? Well, we'll be looking at insurrection hearings this week, and that's just a glimpse of how that turned out. So I say go to the polls today. If you don't do anything else, if you've not turned in that ballot, make sure you vote. Your vote is your voice, and those are my words to live by. There's this saying in politics that if you don't vote on Tuesday, you cannot complain on Wednesday. All right, y'all, there's a lot riding on this election. This is a very, very important election. And there are other important elections, from the sheriff of Los Angeles to that state controller race for Malia Cohen. Again, will be the first Black woman to hold that statewide constitutional office. Another super accomplished woman who's been in politics for over a decade. Younger, I think she's under 50 years old, double degreed, outstanding, was on the Board of Supervisors in San Francisco, has been on the Board of Equalization, and has a shot, again, of making history as the first Black woman state controller for the state of California. Yeah, I'm all about making history in this election, in case you didn't realize that. So I say go out there and make some history today and vote. Remember, we're all in this together, and be safe out there.